What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the Terminator 2 cabinet from Arcade1up. 6 months later, is it still worth it? Okay, so first things first, I've had this cabinet for 8 months, not 6 months. So 6 months is kind of the cutoff point where I'm going to do a review on these cabinets. I'm going to wait at least 6 months, see how I feel at the end of that 6 months, and we're going to take into account a lot of different factors. So over that 6 months, how many problems have I had? Over that 6 months, how much playtime has the cabinet seen? How many modifications have I done to the cabinet? We're going to talk about all that stuff, and then at the end, we're going to really get down to what I think the cabinet is worth and if it was ever worth that original price that I paid. So let's start off with the overall cabinet itself and how it has held up over time. This has Ascendant light gun technology in it, similar to the Big Buck Hunter. These guns get a lot of play. These guns also got a lot of criticism by me and others as far as their quality or lack thereof. They do feel cheap. They feel thin. They don't feel as quality as the Sinden light guns that you buy direct from Sinden. That's a much better feeling gun in the hand. There is no recoil. You do have the little rat-a-tat-tat motor in the gun that makes that noise. But the overall feel does feel like a toy. It does feel cheap. All that being said, though, about the guns, they've held up pretty well. One of the guns, I believe it's actually the red gun. Yeah, it's this one right here. So I've taken apart both these guns to fix multiple little issues. Nothing that was crucial, nothing that cost me any money. I didn't have to get a replacement gun. But there were little issues that I had to take care of. There's pieces that, one piece fell off one of the guns, rolling around the back, and I had to fix that. This one, the red gun is missing the lens, the protective clear lens over the camera. It just didn't ship with it, and I never followed up with Arcade1up to get a replacement. I didn't bother. It hasn't really hurt the experience. It hasn't hurt the functionality of the gun. So I guess for the most point, knock on wood, at this point I should say, it's doing okay. It's doing all right. Modifications. So modifications that I put this thing through, other than obviously the big thing, the first thing that I did, the free mod, was just cutting the bottom off of this little cup that the gun sits in so I could tuck in the cords. The cords are actually really long, and the way this cabinet ships, the cords hang down, almost touching the riser, which is okay. I don't like the way that looks, but it could be a safety issue. If you got a bunch of kids running around, maybe they run by and they grab the cord, maybe it gets wrapped around their neck, or maybe, if nothing else, because these guns are so cheap, if you were to yank this out of its holster, it's probably going to damage the gun. So tucking that in made a big difference. It cleans up the look of it. Some people have even gone as far, they've taken this mod kind of to the next level and eliminated the cord sticking out completely. But I think that's something you should probably do for safety, for aesthetics. You don't have to, but that's just something I think you should do. And as far as that mod impacting gameplay, it really didn't impact it negatively. And the functionality and all that is still good to go. So that was the first modification. The second modification was the marquee. If you remember, the original marquee was not the greatest. It wasn't the worst we've seen. It's not as bad, I think, in my opinion, as the NFL Blitz cabinet was as far as being washed out, but it was washed out. It wasn't ideal. So I went to Joe Sabo and got a replacement marquee that looks gorgeous. It looks absolutely beautiful. But if you remember that installation video, I had to put a couple toothpicks on the bottom to kind of space that up. Joe Sabo's marquee was just a little too, wasn't quite as tall as it should have been to fill up that space. It kind of sunk down a little bit. So to even that up, I just put a couple little spacers in there, and it was fine. And it wasn't worth going back to Joe Sabo to get another replacement. Didn't make any sense to me. Sabo Arcades does a great job of producing these marquees, and beyond that little space fitment issue, it looks great. So I didn't bother with it. Last modification I've done to this was the addition of an official Arcade1up molded coin door. Why this never came on the cabinet, I have no idea. It absolutely fits the cabinet. It looks great, because without this here, it's just a big blank, black piece of wood, and it's just begging for this coin door. So that definitely needed to go there for sure. Wasn't cheap to get the original one. To get an Arcade1up original, I wanted to go factory original to kind of match the other cabs in my arcade, so I had to go with that. But you could obviously go with something cheaper, different brand, aftermarket, and maybe save yourself a little bit of money there. So we talked about the guns, we talked about the modifications. The cab overall, besides the guns, has held up well. I move my cabs around probably, I don't know, about as much as many of you will. Maybe a little bit more in the initial phase, because I had to do a lot of modifications here. I was still working on the arcade, so things would get moved around as I was painting the base and all that, putting them back, and then I would rearrange things to kind of get the layout exactly how I wanted. So that was something that kind of caused me to move this thing around a lot. Problems I've had with the cabinet, I had one issue with the on-off switch. I thought it was the PCB. Turns out the PCB was fine. It really wasn't the issue at all. What I had to do was take the control panel off and get to the encoder board and unplug that on-off switch cord, that cable. Unplug that, plug it back in. Hasn't given me a problem since. It's a weird thing. It's like a weird nuisance thing that happened once. And, you know, so far, like I said, knock on wood, it hasn't done it again. So that's definitely good. So beyond those little issues, little quirks, that's really about it. For the most part, I've not had any software issues. I've not had any, I mean, you can see as it scrolls by, it has retained all my high scores. I've unplugged the cabinet many times, plugged it back in, and not had an issue at all when it comes to that. The game itself plays as it originally played when I first bought the thing. So if you have the issue, you have issues with the emulation, those issues don't, you know, fix themselves over time. The emulation is the emulation. It is what it is at this point. So have I enjoyed the experience? Have I enjoyed owning this cabinet? Here I am 6-8 months later. Do I enjoy this cabinet? I do enjoy the cabinet. Now, where does it rank as far as playtime within my arcade? It's got to be top 5. It's definitely top 5, especially when you consider guests that come over to the arcade. They see a light gun game. That's one of the first things that they gravitate towards. It's between this and my racing cab, my custom racing cab, are the two that everybody kind of runs to. The fighting games are fine. The fighting games are fun, but you know, casual gamers will go with a driving game or shooting game over another, you know, fighter. And now that I have Blitz in here, I've got the countercade for NBA Jam. Those are much more casual. Those get a little bit of play, but this is definitely top 5. It's been really fun. The guns have not failed me yet. I know not everybody can say that, but the guns haven't failed me yet. Now, if those fail, you know, that's a big problem. It's a big issue, but they haven't failed me yet. So I've enjoyed it. It's top 5. Now, the big question. The big question is, this thing originally retailed for $6.99. That's what I paid. I paid $6.99 for this cabinet. No special deals, no influencer discounts, nothing. $6.99 is what I paid. One game was always the issue. One game was always the big thing when this thing was originally announced and it originally was sold. $6.99 for one game. That was a tough, steep hill to climb. Do I think overall now, was it worth what I paid for it back then? The answer is no. It was definitely not worth $700 in any way, shape, or form. But if you want to get these things early, you're gonna have to pay that premium. It's just it is what it is. You know, these things do. Fortunately for everyone else who didn't buy it right away, they do depreciate pretty quickly, and those sale prices start popping up. We've seen this thing as low as $3.99. Is that the price you should buy this for? Well, listen, if you're interested in this cabinet, I think it is worth, in my opinion, all day long, you could pay $4.99 for this cabinet and you're going to enjoy it. Now, obviously, you have to really enjoy T2 because it's the only freaking game on this cabinet. But if you like that game, if you like Arcade1up overall, the build quality is the build quality. The emulation, in my opinion, is pretty good. Others that really have probably a better, deeper knowledge of the original arcade ROM are going to tell you something different. I'm going to leave those opinions to them. You decide for yourself. But as far as I'm concerned, this game, this cabinet, even without the coin door, even without the modification that you can do for free, even with the marquee that isn't quite what it should be, I think it's worth $4.99 all day long. And even though I paid $700, I'm glad I had this cabinet in my arcade. Absolutely. Now, if Arcade1up came out with more shooting guns, would this get more play than House of Dead? I don't know, but I can't make that comparison because it doesn't exist yet. So for now, 6 months later, 8 months later, I'm really happy with this cabinet. But I think it's worth about $4.99. That's definitely a sweet spot. So if you see it for that price, you should definitely pick it up. And of course, anything lower than that is just a bonus. Hey, thank you so much for stopping by and checking out the channel. Y'all have a blessed day, and I will see all of you next time.